Good morning, everyone. I'm going to turn the program over to our president, Chuck Oldfather, to get us started today. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And I've asked him to unmute. If everyone else would mute, that would be perfect.
Can you hear me, Amy?
We can, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll get this annual meeting off and running here. And first of all, I'd just like to say hello and welcome to our 2020 annual meeting, celebrating the 100th year for our association. What a year 2020 has been in our lives and for realtors also. I wanted to thank RACI officers, directors, RACI staff, and all of you RACI members for all your leadership and ideas to get us through this year. It has been a real privilege serving you as your RACI president in this year of a lifetime. It is my wish for all of us to get back to more normal times in 2021. We'll start, first of all, with the backbone of our RACI organization is the board of directors. The board is made up of members from our 6 counties. The RACI board is proactively looking for opportunities to serve our members well. I would like to personally thank each director for their efforts and dedication. Representing Cass County is Jason Carter, Tom Hayes, and Cindy Heinzman. Representing Grant County, Stacy Cannon, Janet Barnett, and Susie Mack. Representing Howard County, Sharice Goodnight, Angie Rowe, and Andy Hardy. Representing Miami County, along with me, are Stacia Bonifant and Dee Dee Richards. Representing Tipton County is Kim Satong, Jennifer Ritchie, and PJ Ryan. And finally, representing Wabash County, Bob Lundquist, Christy Kisner, and Lori Siders. It has been an honor working alongside each of you. Thank you for your support and guidance during my year as RACI president. We've wrapped up the 2020 RACI Board of Directors election and the results are in. There were no petitions to add additional candidates. Therefore, I, Chuck Oldfather, RACI Board of Directors President, will cast a unanimous ballot to elect Tom Hayes, Janet Barnett, Chanel Cahill, Dee Dee Richards, Jennifer Ritchie, and Christy Kisner to the RACI Board of Directors for a 3-year term beginning January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. Thank you to these volunteer leaders for their time, contributions, and for stepping up to serve. Despite the challenges of getting together in person and missing our beloved annual RPAC auctions, the need and relevance of RPAC is more than ever. You may ask, what has RPAC done for me? IAR staff led a coalition of housing industry interests to successfully lobby Governor Eric Holcomb to declare real estate as an essential service. This allowed real estate transactions to continue in line with COVID-19 health and safety practices during the initial months of the pandemic. At the federal level, RPAC advocated on the behalf as early as March 12th with the CARES Act, Paycheck Protection Program, and pandemic unemployment assistance containing provisions that made it possible for realtors to take advantage of much needed resources. Next week, the RACI RPAC Fundraising Committee is kicking off a phone bank to raise much needed funds for further advocating for realtors, home ownership, and private property rights. RACI has a long-standing transaction and tradition of RPAC support and engagement. Please consider supporting RPAC as the advocacy teams have been steadfast in ensuring business sustainability of the real estate industry. We are incredibly pleased to have raised $5,129 to feed the children throughout the RACI counties. Community Outreach Chair, Brian London, our realtors and affiliates continue to see the need to respond to our children. We are thankful for the opportunity United Way provided us to raise funds and feed children. And now it's time for introducing our speaker, Gabby VanAlstine, MBA, is loving life as Director of People Operations at Emplify, an organization that measures employee engagement and partners with customers to create organizational impact. Prior to Emplify, she loved teaching progressive and best practices in human resources at IU Kokomo. She has 14 years of experience in human resources and loves all things related to organizational psychology, leadership development, and employee experience. Gabby has experience in designing DEI initiatives to foster a shared sense of belonging at work and cultivate a caring, inclusive organizational culture. She has received Safe Space certification through Indiana University and is passionate about inclusion in every facet of her life. Gabby has built her career on building relationships with others, understanding and appreciating the differences that everyone brings to the table, and is super excited to share some of those insights, data, and even some tips on how to be more inclusive realtor. Let's welcome Gabby.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. It is wonderful to be here with you today. And, you know, I would love the opportunity to connect with you on this call, but also, you know, afterwards, I'll include my email in the presentation and everything like that. So happy to always answer any questions. So, and let me share. Okay, so I think I will need, screen sharing is disabled, Stephanie. So if you could share my presentation, that would be awesome. Or is that Amy? I'm not sure who the host is. Does anyone see my presentation? I see a bunch of wonderful faces, but not my slideshow. Okay, here we go. I think I can do this now. Awesome. Okay. Okay, you can. Okay, so now someone else is sharing and it says I cannot screen share while the other participant is sharing. I'm so sorry. Gotta love technology, right? This is part of, this is the new workforce. So this is part of my life every day. Okay, I think someone else is sharing. Tara, is there a Terry Gallingham? Okay, all right, we're in business. Okay, all right, so sorry about all of those antics. But as I was saying, I'm super excited. Thank you for the kind introduction, Charles. It's great to meet you. And definitely do want to share some insights regarding advancing diversity today. So just a little bit about me. As Charles mentioned, I've worked in human resources for 16 years. 2 of those years, of course, I've taught human resources. And so I have been always tangentially connected to the topics of diversity and inclusion. You know, I'm super excited to answer any questions. I will be honest with you that, you know, real estate is, you know, a little bit of a new area for me. I've never worked, obviously, in real estate. I've always supported individuals in a variety of industries, but, you know, would love to hear your thoughts as we go forward. And if you have specific questions that would be most relevant for you. So what I'd like to do today is I'll be sharing with you just some data regarding diversity in real estate, so home ownership and things like that. Then I'll also share with you just a couple important concepts and really definitions regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, just so that, you know, I can make sure that everyone kind of is familiar with these important things as you begin or continue along your journey. And then I'll also share some resources with you that have been very helpful for me along this journey. So hopefully you'll get some value out of those. And then lastly, I'll share some tips and ideas that I had regarding being an inclusive realtor. So bringing, you know, what we talk about today and some other concepts that you're familiar with into your work every day. So first, I would love to start with a question. So if everyone could, I would love for you to use the Zoom chat and just chat me a question or something that you'd really like to get out of this conversation today. I would love to try to tailor this to you or answer your questions offline. So take a minute to think about it. And then I would love for you to chat something, you know, I'm hoping to learn this, or I'm a little unclear here. And I can see, you know, if I can tailor that, or we can connect after. And I would love to help you with that. And don't ghost me. I see all those wonderful faces out there this morning. Hi, Tammy. The chat is just exploding. Any topics or things that you would like me to discuss or share with you today? Okay. So if you're having trouble finding the chat, you can just unmute and we can talk about it. Would anyone like to share anything you'd like to get out of today? We have a quiet group. So you know, diversity and inclusion also includes, you need to think about introverts and extroverts as well. So maybe we have a lot of introverts on the call, although I wouldn't think that for real estate, right? Anything anyone wants to talk about? I see a couple people unmuted, but I'll just continue. And how about this? If you all will promise me that if you have questions, you let me know and you can type it in the chat, or if we get done early, then you can ask those questions. How does that sound? Can I get a couple head nods? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so I will continue with my presentation, but I will also stay tuned into the chat, and just if you have questions, feel free to unmute. Really, I think the first thing that's super important is to talk about, you know, diversity as it relates to homeownership. So as I was preparing to speak to you lovely people today, I dug in, I did a little bit of research, and you may be familiar with these statistics, but I was surprised. I'll share that with you. So out of, you know, 67% of Americans, and this is, you know, the most recent data I could find from the Census Bureau, were homeowners. Of those 67%, 76% identified as non-Hispanic white homeowners. 47% identified as Black, and 51% identified as Hispanic. So, you know, there is quite a bit of disparity in regards to homeownership. So you're looking at 76% of homeowners identify as white versus 47% identify as Black. And I think it's also interesting to note that that was the most recent data, either from 2019 or early 2020. In 2018, about 43% of those homeowners identified as Black, which was actually the same rate as identified in 1968. And so, meaning that there hasn't been a lot of progress in terms of, you know, diversity in home ownership. And, you know, kind of why is that? And I think a couple things that are really important to know is, you know, the median net worth of Black and Latino families reported in 2014 was $9,590 and $17,530 respectively. So you're looking at net worth of $9,590. Now, contrast that with the median net worth reported for a white family, $130,000. Okay, so that's pretty significant divide. Researchers at Yale and Northwestern that published the study estimated that for every $100 in white family wealth, Black families hold $5 for every 100 that white families hold. And I thought it was interesting that, before they actually published this study, they asked people, what do you think? So, for every $100 that white families hold, what would you guesstimate that Black families hold? And the guesses came out to around $80 for every $100 versus the actual reality, which is $5. So they were off by about 15,000%, right? So there's a lot of economic and wealth divide in this country. And what is the cause of it? Really, it's a lot of factors. It's hard to pinpoint a factor. Our history of, really discrimination as a country, things like Jim Crow laws, redlining, wealth and education gaps. And then another big factor presenting our country is inheritance. So it's estimated that about 60% of the wealth in our company is HR person, company, 60% of the wealth in our country is inherited. So, that perpetuates low socioeconomic status and systemic inequality. It really does. So let me see, I have a question in the chat. In our country, there's discussion of revising old subdivision covenants that were racist. That's wonderful. As realtors, we're aware that the Civil Rights Act nullified those discriminatory practices. Are you seeing conversations on recognition of history versus revision of documents? That's a great question, Charmaine, and thank you for asking that. I am not yet, but I think we're all aware that, it's way too late. We should have always been having this conversation, but there has been a lot of movement in regards to DEI conversations in almost all factors of the country. So I'm hopeful that there will be more discussions regarding this. I know in corporate America, there certainly are, right? Where this is, something, the companies that we work with at Emplify are almost all prioritizing DEI initiatives. So it's my hope that that parlays into, revising old documents, or looking at some of our laws, maybe reversing some case law decisions. I will share, I think a lot of things might be on pause right now in our country because of the election. So hopefully, these are, progress isn't stalled by that and it continues. But great questions. So, another thing that I think it's important to understand when you look at home ownership, we all know, and I used to teach along with HR at IU, I taught fundamentals of business. And I always taught my freshman students, right? Borrowing is a fundamental principle of building wealth, right? In order to build wealth, most of the time, unless you have that, inherited money, you are borrowing. Borrowing, allows you to buy a home, right? Get school loans. It's an unseen factor, right? In building that wealth. And the thing that's really interesting is it's also an unseen factor in perpetuating the inability for underserved populations to overcome systemic barriers, because the cost of interest is actually more for underserved populations. So, they did a lot of studies regarding this, and controlling for income, debt to income ratio, neighborhood, and lender, there were still higher interest rates for Black and Latinx individuals, meaning that buying the same house with the same job in the same neighborhood with a similar portfolio costs more if you are diverse. So I thought that was really interesting as well. All the more reason, right, that it's important to take, I guess, a very intentional lens in practicing real estate to be, an inclusive realtor. I also looked at diversity in real estate as a profession. And there was a 2017 study I found by Bella Research Group that found more than 75% of senior execs in commercial real estate identified as white men. Only about 1.3% of those high-level positions were held by Black men, about 14% held by white women, and then non-white women held fewer than 1% of senior executive level jobs. And this is, something that we see in all facets of corporate America as well. The higher the level of the job, the less underserved populations, the less diversity, really. And then I also looked at the National Association of Realtors and their demographic data. It seems like the typical realtor is a 54-year-old white female who attended college, is a homeowner. About 67% of all realtors identify as female, which there is some growth there. And in looking at race, 80% of realtors identified as white, 10% Latinx, about 6% Black, and 5% Asian Pacific Islanders. And so I thought that was interesting. Among those who had 2 years of experience or less in real estate, though, 33% were minorities, meaning newer realtors are starting to be more diverse, which is good. And then I found it interesting, most realtors, 82% reported being fluent only in speaking English. So I would think that could be a market opportunity for some of you. Get some Rosetta Stone, right? And maybe, maybe learn another language. But I thought that was really interesting. And about 13% of realtors said that they were born outside of the United States. So when you look at it on this graph, I mean, I think it's pretty startling. I think it's pretty significant. The divide among home ownership in regards to diversity and inclusion. So the question is, why is this important to you? And really diversity, in my work, in the world that I see every day, right? Diversity is just a common component. It's always relevant and present in high performing organizations. Diversity leads to more revenue, more innovation, and market disruption. And this happens because we believe the blend of backgrounds and experiences, right, shape our perception and shape the way that we think about things. And so, that's always at play, right? The more an idea is batted around, ideally, the better it will be. So it leads to more revenue in business. Now, as it relates to real estate, as it relates to, the service industry, a concept is very important when it comes to diversity. And that concept is called psychological safety. Has anyone heard of the concept of psychological safety before? Maybe raise your hand. If you have, it looks like some head shaking no. Psychological safety is a really important concept, and I'm happy to share it with you today. And really what it is it's creating an environment in which people believe that they can speak up candidly with ideas, right? With questions, with concerns, where people feel that they can be real. And it's vital to leveraging the benefits of diversity and inclusion because it makes it a reality for us. Really, in short, psychological safety enables candor. So if your clients feel that they are psychologically safe with you, right, then they are going to feel more like they can give you feedback, more like they'll share with you what they really want and what they're looking for. They'll trust you more. And after all, I can imagine, right? Trust is probably the most essential element for you as a real estate agent when you're building those relationships. There's been a lot of academic literature on the power of psychological safety, in regards to performance. I'm getting some good questions in the chat. So I love this, absolutely. So I will have some recommendations for you on being inclusive and serving the needs of all income types to help you build that psychological safety. Really, there are 3 things to help you build psychological safety with others. Are you ready? Let's see those head nods again to make sure. So ghosting is a very real thing with Zoom. I think you know this, right? I ghost people on Zoom. I'm helping us be psychologically safe with one another, but it happens. So sometimes I'm like, let me see your head nod. And I know it's ridiculous, but I just want to make sure I'm not putting you out of sleep yet. But really there are 3 parts of psychological safety. 1, admitting your own fallibility. So saying, you know, diversity and inclusion, building a psychologically safe environment, these are things I don't know. Admitting that to yourself. Maybe admitting to yourself that you do have an implicit bias. And just so you know, Harvard has implicit bias association tests. So they're completely anonymous, but you can go online and you can test and see if maybe you do have a bias towards, you know, younger people. Maybe you have a bias towards a certain gender and you just prefer to work with, to communicate, to delegate to people, right, of that gender, of that race, of that age. They're called Harvard Implicit Bias Association tests if you want to do those. And like I said, it's really important in admitting your own fallibility. We all have biases and we're all working to them. And research strongly suggests that when you admit it, you will then be able to counter that bias more. So step one is admitting your own fallibility. Step two, this is really easy and this is why you're here today, is working to learn. So admitting I don't know about this concept maybe as much as I should, or admitting, you know, I don't know about psychological safety, but working to learn how to cultivate it. And then the third step is ever present in all communication with your clients, all communication with your peers on this call, with your family, with other people we're trying to build a relationship with. Just remain curious. Remain curious, ask questions, learn about people, right? That's just part of building a great relationship. And that is all part of psychological safety. So the next thing that I want to talk about are just briefly some concepts that I want to expose you to that I think will help you in building psychological safe relationships with your clients. The first is the concept of intersectionality. Then I'll talk briefly about microaggressions, accessibility, and inclusive language. And then I'll finish with my tips on being a more inclusive realtor. So the first concept, oh, thanks, Stephanie. Man, she's cool. She chatted the link in the chat for you all on those implicit bias association tests. So the first concept of intersectionality, everyone sees this wheel. Intersectionality is a concept to explain the interconnected nature of social categorizations. And when we think about diversity, a lot of times we think about age, race, sexual orientation or identity, ethnicity. We think about those things in the middle of the circle. But what we don't think about is what's on the outside of the circle. And look at some of those classifications. Functional specialty. When you ask me to describe myself, I certainly say I'm an HR professional, right? Maybe I say, yeah, I'm a brunette HR professional, you know, that, you know, loves Disney. I'm sharing my beliefs with you as well. All of us are comprised of the middle circle as well as many things on the outer circle. And it's a really interesting conversation for you. If you want to remain curious about people, ask them when you feel like you have a psychologically safe environment. And I'm not talking about the first time you meet your clients, right? But I'm talking about your friends, about your colleagues. Ask them how they identify. It is a great conversation. And I did this in a really diverse group at IU. And a lot of people would say, you know, I identify as a woman. Some people said, I identify as a mother. I identify as, you know, a Black professor, you know. So really on how we identify, I identify as a gay male. People identify on all aspects of this color wheel, on this intersectionality wheel. And the reason why it's really important is because every day when you go to work, every time when you meet someone new, every time when you're showing a client houses, right? You're working not just someone that is a 65-year-old person. You're working, right, with a 65-year-old person that maybe they're married, maybe they're widowed, maybe, you know, they have some kind of disability, some kind of impairment, maybe they have some kind of belief. So remaining curious and understanding that we all identify in many ways will help you, right, understand more about them and more about these perspectives that they're bringing to the table. Intersectionality is a really important concept in DEI circles because it just helps you learn so much about other humans, which helps you build that trust. Another thing that's really important it's a concept of microaggressions. And sometimes mentioning microaggressions from. That is, am I still here? Am I still, can I get a head nod? I got a little, your internet connection is unstable. Do you ever, anytime it says that to me, I say, well, it's not the only thing that's unstable. But I'm glad I'm still with you all. But, you know, when you're asking a question like that, you can be committing, right, a microaggression. There really is a lot of microaggressions, and I will share after the call, but something like saying, meeting someone that has an accent and saying to them, you know, you speak really good English. That can be a microaggression. What it does is it's reminding them or enforcing the idea that you don't identify with them as an American, right? You identify that they are foreign. When you say things like, you know, America is a melting pot, you know, what you're doing is you're kind of maybe erasing the history and the importance of the ethnicity that they bring to the table, right? Whenever someone walks past and maybe, you know, maybe a hoodie on, face is covered, did you ever pull your purse a little closer to you, right? Did you ever, you know, wait and not go in an elevator? Some of these things you may do because you feel, yeah, it's unsafe, but some of them also be microaggressions. And what you're doing is you're basically labeling someone, you're acting out in that behavior, you're assuming, right? And you can be sending a message that can be damning. So if you could have a 3-hour training on microaggressions, I will just share with you all a resource that I have, and I'll put this in the chat, that could be helpful for you when you're you know, trying to educate yourself a little bit more on microaggressions. But it is an important concept to understand in the ENI circles. And then the last concept I want to share is accessibility. And again, this could also be a 3-hour training, but a lot of times we think about, can everyone see my screen? Can you see the accessibility slide? Okay. Yep. So a lot of times we think about accessibility in terms of, okay, so this entrance has to have a ramp for a wheelchair, right? That we think about accessibility in terms of mobility a lot. But there's a lot of other ways that we need to view accessibility. And especially now in the virtual world with COVID, how many times do we send something out for someone to read, right? How many times do we communicate electronically? There is content accessibility that helps people that have visual impairments, that have, you know, maybe some kind of learning impairment where they can't read things, maybe they have dyslexia or something like that. And there's a lot of electronic tools to help you enable the content you send. And I'll share those with you shortly when you're thinking about accessibility. Another thing we do is sometimes we're out, we're meeting a client, and maybe we're talking or we're walking away from them. They could have a hearing impairment, right? And they're actually reading your lips. We're assuming all of the time that people are operating with no impairment. And what we need to do is we need to think about accessibility, which is making information available to everyone, regardless of their impairment. And so we need to be more communicative, more expressive, and more understanding of those things. And it just speaks to more than mobility, right? So I really like this slide because it reminds you of cognitive impairments. Of course, there's mobility, there's visual, there's hearing, and there's speech impairment. So, and then the last thing, I'm also going to share a research or a document, a resource for you regarding inclusive language. But this is a constant evolving discussion area, and it is definitely a way that I think that you can set yourself apart as a really inclusive leader. And I just shared this with you, and this is a document actually that we created at Emplify to help us be more inclusive with our language. But really, a lot of things that we do is we say, oh, you know, the disabled person, okay, instead of saying the person with a disability. We don't put people first. You know, we may say, you know, oh, this woman, you know, this paraplegic woman, instead of saying this woman that has paraplegia, right? We need to consider how to be more inclusive with our language, which is very difficult because these are things that are very embedded into the way that we speak, the way that we learned. Maybe one of your clients identifies as transgender. And so maybe, that person would prefer, instead of saying she, maybe they have a different pronoun that they prefer to use. There's different pronouns like ZE you can use, or they might just prefer the word they. They is an acceptable gender neutral pronoun now. And so it's a long process, right, to learn and to continue to evolve in this. And honestly, the body of inclusive language is changing every minute as well. But I've shared that document with you. I encourage you to take a look at it and read about it. Another part of inclusive language is being careful of the idioms and slang terms that we use, right? So sometimes we can say things that we think that they're just fine and there's some kind of expression like grandfathered in. Really, it has a discriminatory history, and I've listed it in that document for you. But no one is really, ready to fight you on these things and be super upset. And a lot of people don't know. But again, it's a way that you can make yourself better. It's a way you can ensure that you're not offending other people. And it's a way that you can show, look, I see you, I hear you, I validate you, which builds that psychological safety. Okay, so let me stop there before I actually share some really tactical tips on being an inclusive realtor. Are there any questions or things that you'd like to discuss? I know I didn't have much success or input last time, but before I go ahead, is there any questions, any concerns, anything that you want to talk about before I share some really tactical tips with you? Okay. All right, well, you know how to stop me, and then I've also got some great questions in the chat so far and some great connections. Let's talk action. I love action. I'm a doer. I don't know if anyone's taken a Strength Finders, but I'm an executor. So I'm always really tactical, and I want you to walk away with some things. Look, these are things that I absolutely can do. So I've broken this into 3 parts. One is being an inclusive realtor when I'm talking about building relationships. The next, I'll talk about showings and how to be more inclusive with showings and like that personal interaction when you're actually face-to-face. And then the last part would be like, in working on the offer and post-sale, some ideas for you. But the first thing is really just understanding your market. So just like I dug into real estate, I think it would be great for you to dig into the demographics of the area in which you serve, right? If you haven't already. I'm sure that you have, but really understand about it. I have listed community involvement. Align yourself with some of the organizations in your community that help underserved populations, right? And learn more about them just so that you educate yourself, so that you are constantly, expanding, right, your view on that intersectionality wheel. Another thing that's really important, when you're building relationships with clients, I think it's great. I've had one realtor do this so far, but really we had like a kickoff conversation, and they asked about me. They asked about my family. They asked like what my parents did for a living, right? Not just, it wasn't all tactical, but it was a great conversation. It was like intake. So they could really learn more about me, and so that they can understand what I was comfortable with, obviously in terms of, the sale, but just in terms of like seeing all the homes, my ideal preferred schedule. They like learning about my background. Still seeing sorry about that. Okay, I think that slide changed now. Did the slide change now? No, it did not. Oh, okay. There we go. I think I've got it. Okay, sorry. Still struggling with technology sometimes, guys. So anyways, so I think doing some kind of intake meeting in which you can really understand and listening to your clients and validating them a lot of the time. Sometimes someone may say something and maybe you are going to disagree with your client. Like, I don't think that we should, shy away from this house because I believe that we'll be able to negotiate them down. But your client says, well, I have very real concerns about that. Always empathize, always validate. I see you, I understand that. I hear you, right? And that goes a long way towards that psychological safety. Another thing would be, taking best vesting in some sort of mentorship program within the community. You saw the statistics regarding the diversity with home ownership, right? Maybe it's some kind of program where you can share information on how to best set your clients up to be able to buy a home someday. Or maybe you're mentoring young, diverse realtors. Whatever it is, but being aligned and broadening your experiences there will help you build more inclusive relationships, not just with the people you're serving, but also with your clients in the future. I do want to share just being that constant curious to learn. TheMuse.com is a website. They have free diversity online courses. There's at least 9 of them. So there's one on inclusive language. You can continue to build your savvy in those areas so that you can just keep learning more, and you will be able to be a more inclusive realtor, and people will want to have you represented. And then representing them. Another thing I would share with you as well is just reach out to people. Reach out to people that work in the D&I space to learn more. Or, a lot of times they're doing podcasts and webinars now that are free through the chamber. These are 2 of my favorites in the Indianapolis area, Lindsay Picardo and Julie Katz. And even just following them on LinkedIn, they post great articles and resources. Commit to reading one of those a week, right? Just so that you can do better at, talking the talk. So you can learn more about organizations that are doing things that may be a great connection or partner for you as you try to grow and build more relationships, right? And then the last thing I'll share are just a couple communication hacks. One thing that I started doing is in my signature on my email, I have the pronouns with which I identify, right? That signals to people, this is a woman that understands intersectionality a little bit, and I want to know how you identify. And so I'm inviting you, by sharing how I identify, I'm inviting you to share how you identify. So maybe putting that on your signature. Another thing you can think about is maybe you have some kind of inclusive promise that you yourself make and craft a sentence. I promise to, represent a wide range of clients and do my best to be inclusive in all conversations and always have your best interest at heart. Something that feels right to you and personal, and you personalize your signature with it. And just sharing outwardly that you are an empathetic realtor, that you're an inclusive realtor, that you care about building that psychological safety. I think that would be a great idea. Next, so inclusive showings, and maybe you're even doing open houses, but some things to consider, and this gets really granular, but I talked about accessible content, web content. Maybe you're creating flyers for homes that you're marketing. Maybe you're sharing content over the web with other realtors, but there is so much information out there about how to make your content accessible. And why this is important is because if I share a document with someone who uses a screen reader and it's not accessible, things like tables, things like images, those screen readers can't handle those if you don't make your document accessible. So you aren't getting everyone. You aren't making your information accessible to everyone. So one thing you can do is just constantly educate yourself. If you just Google Indiana University inclusive content, they are accessible content. They will have a lot of free resources for you. Another thing is most Microsoft and Adobe programs have an accessibility tool. So I put a little arrow here. I don't know what version of Word you're using. I assume that maybe you work with Word a lot. Of course, if you use Google Docs, Google has it. If you're using Adobe, Adobe has it. But under the Review tab ribbon, you can see there's a box here that says Check Accessibility. And it's just like spell check and grammar check. It takes you through and it says, Gabby, you might want to think about changing this table for screen readers. Gabby, you might want to label. So when I put an image on a document, you can actually put text in that won't show on the document if you're not using a screen reader. But if you are using a screen reader, it will read that text. So if you're just putting a funny image on the document, you might just want to put funny image of a woman holding hand, or just say, non-related content. But if you're putting a picture of, a beautiful house, you might want to say, 2-story colonial with a white porch, and actually describe it a little, so that someone that maybe isn't able to pick up on all the images, all the colors, whatever, when they're looking at that electronic content, they can read and they can picture it in their head, right? Or if they can't see too well and they're using a screen reader, it's making that image come to life for them. So I strongly recommend starting that process of making all of your documents accessible. Another thing, I talked about communication hacks in the last slide, but maybe in your email signature also, you want to say something like, if you need assistance before the showing, if you need assistance before this home tour, let me know. Okay, and so maybe they might need help with a sign language interpreter. Maybe you just are opening the dialogue that they're going to need help getting into the house because it has, I don't know, a big stairway, right? But putting that out there opens that conversation up for people. So this is something for HR. We've been doing this for years, right? We say, if you need assistance completing this employment application, contact us. I think there's no reason why all service sectors, right, can't start asking this question. People don't have to volunteer this information, but asking it helps. And then third is just anytime you're communicating with someone, right, inclusive language, you can ask, maybe, you're working with someone and you want to ask, what pronouns do you prefer I use when I refer to you? You can ask that. That's perfectly acceptable nowadays, right? So making sure that you're using that inclusive language, staying away from idioms, not engaging in microaggressions like, oh, I hear an accent, where are you from? Those are ways that you can be inclusive with showings. And the last thing I want to share is something that is actually really popular and in vogue now, is to be more inclusive when you're considering setting up a home, right, for different kinds of allergies and breathing impairments. And so I know I've been to open houses that have, what are those things called, diffusers, and they smell absolutely lovely. I personally love it, or maybe there were just cookies in the oven. I love it, but you may have individuals that have a strong allergy or some kind of issue like COPD. My mother is going through a health issue right now where she cannot be exposed to strong scents. So you might have to be careful about that, right? And start tailoring and thinking about these inclusive, ways to be inclusive, but still market things appropriately. And I'll share with you the best resource for that is actually an HR1, and it's called JAN, J-A-N, and it's the Job Accommodation Network. But it will have a lot of information that I think you can kind of, and I'll put it here to everyone, that you can kind of use jan.org and, tailor to what you do. And the last thing that I will share are just some tips for being an inclusive realtor whenever it comes to like the offer and post sale. One thing I think I already shared about, but it's that validation component. Some people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, some people that had triggering events may have a different kind of negotiation style, right? They may be stressed out. Maybe they are dealing with some kind of anxiety disorder or stress disorder. And so the whole offer negotiation phase could be concerning for them, right? So the advice that I would give you there is something I deal with a lot in resources. And it's just, one, hopefully you already have that psychologically safe environment. You could say, I could tell something's troubling to you. Please share with me how I can help you right now. How can I best help you with this? How can I help guide you through this? Okay. And then two, it's just monitoring, right? And understanding maybe when it's time, hey, do we need to take a break? I noticed that you're getting very worked up about this. Do we need to take a break and come back to it? Can I call you back in an hour? When you monitor that someone is stressed or maybe going through something, you can then test for what's appropriate. So if this is stressing you out too much, can I call you back in an hour? We'll pick up. I do want to move quickly because I'm a little concerned about this, right? And maybe, depending on your personal style as a realtor, you shoulder a load if you have someone that has that kind of disorder or is freaking out a little bit about that. Another thing, two other ideas for you are you can develop resources, right, that you share with individuals that may help, if you haven't already, first-time home buyers. Maybe there's, you know, some kind of community resources for underserved groups or underserved individuals that will help them either buy that home, get approved for that loan. Maybe there's lenders that work specifically with, you know, diverse populations. Maybe there's people that do, you know, interpretation if it's into a different language for free. So developing that list of resources to help someone that is, you know, underserved in some manner be able to buy that home, I think is a wonderful touch. And I think it will help you gain more diverse clients. And I think also probably make your niche as a very inclusive realtor. And then the other thing I wanted to share also is I've had a lot of realtors share, you know, they're like, when I'm moving to a new area, my realtors who I go to, right, if I have a plumbing issue or if I want to build a deck or build a fence, I think it would be great for you to get ahead of this, right, and make relationships with not just trusted third parties that you're going to refer to your clients, but maybe also trusted minority third parties, okay? And so the example that I have from my life is, you know, at Emplify, when someone joins our team, we share with them a swag bag. And we started making sure that we have Black-owned businesses represented in that swag bag, or minority-owned businesses. And we have a little card so that we're promoting these underserved businesses. So maybe you start developing relationships with third parties that are minorities and share that with their clients, because talking about the idea of psychological safety, maybe you have a Latinx client that prefers, right, at times to work with Latinx or support Latinx owned businesses. So if you have that list and you have those relationships, you're able to refer that as well. So broaden that network of third parties that you refer. So those would be my tips for post-sale. And then I am sure that I've bored you all and put you all to sleep. It's the story of my life, but I do want to open it up at this point in time to any questions or thoughts or things that I can help you with. If there's nothing, I do want to share, my email address is, it's super hard. It's just Gabby@Emplify.com. And I will put that in the chat for anyone. Please feel free to message me at any point in time. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love it. And just, you know, if I can ever help you in any way in furthering this conversation on DEI, I am more than happy to. It's one of my passions, and I've loved connecting with you all today. Even though you're quiet, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and I will chug extra coffee for you this morning. So best of luck for a very successful fall and helping people get into wonderful new homes. And thank you for what you do, because realtors have played a very important part in my life. It's a wonderful profession, and I really think it's a calling. And so I love what you do, and hopefully some of these tips you can take and modify them and use. So thanks so much for having me. And with that, I will mute myself and you all can applaud about that. Let me stop my screen share.
Chuck, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I think there's like looks like 9 chats, maybe questions for Gabby in the chat down there I'm seeing. Are you seeing that too? 10?
Yes. Yeah. So I think, okay, so we talked about the revision of documents, and then, there were some great links shared in the chat as well. And then if you missed anything too, I'm happy to share, email me or whatever. I think I've answered all of the questions, but I'm going to take any with any time left or help you any way I can.
Well, great, Gabby. Well, gosh, Gabby, I want to thank you very much for being here today. You've given some great topics. I know diversity and inclusive to all. I mean, I wrote some nice notes down here. I got a lot out of it. I hope everybody else got a lot out of it. but we really thank you for being here today. I want to thank all the members for being here today, and the staff and RACI board members, and just everyone being here for our 2020 annual meeting. It's been a great program. Like I say, I got some really nice things out of it. So we just want to thank you a lot for being here today, and thank everyone for being on the Zoom, which is our quite the thing we've learned this year in 2020 is Zoom meetings. So Amy, do you have anything?
No, I agree with you, Chuck. And, you know, our code of ethics has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to the laws in regarding treating people fairly and really being respectful of others. So, you know, we have a great history in that, and just, I know that they're actually addressing some things now through professional standards. So you may see some additional changes through that. And then additionally, we will be rolling out some more Zoom programming this year. So, you know, I really thank you for all engaging with us in this way, because it is a new reality for us all, for lack of a better way of saying it. But we really think that this is a great way of reaching out to all of you and getting some great information. And Gabby, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your heart and all your knowledge on this great topic.
Thank you so much. It was my honor. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you all for being here today. We'll go ahead and let you all get back to your normal day today, but we want to thank you all for being here for our 2020 annual meeting. Goodbye all.
Bye.